Tracy, what's the cost of these tiny homes?
So right now, we're not selling them outright at this point in time. We've sold some to partners. We have a long list of people who are interested in buying them, so that's our plan B if we are to run out of money. Right now, essentially, oh, sorry. Thank you, Katie. So right now, when we're looking at kind of a cost piece on them, I think that I've got, about 39,000 in the 2 bedrooms and about 32 in the ones. So we are trying to. So obviously we've got to recover costs, and but that still is a really healthy pro forma for us. Our Belgrade project, we already owned the land, and we had owned it since the mid '80s. So we have a very healthy pro forma, and we're going to use them as rentals in Belgrade. And we're looking at rents of about $500 a month, which is about half of what the Belgrade market's able to support right now.
Yeah. What's the inventory that you have left on those, and then what are the lipstick costs that you were talking about?
So right now I have 30 that I'm trying to place in Park County, if we can. Otherwise, those will go to our Plan Bs. And then the lipstick budget that we gave the architects was $7,500 to $10,000.
Okay, so they can only be used in Park County?
No, we could use them elsewhere. Yeah, we're looking at Marr County. So, when we bought them, really our priority was let's look at our service area first. Let's look at the communities that are served by HRDC, Gallatin Park and Marr County. We did sell some to Homeward, and that's Heather would have talked a little bit about their experience in placement, and again, really along the lines of how do they orientate to each other? What are some uses for them? So we did sell some to Homeward because they're a great partner, and frankly, we needed some cash. We sold 8 to Xanterra as well, again because we knew Gardner has such huge housing needs, and a lot of times. As a private nonprofit, we might not have the capacity to develop housing in a community, but we want to work with partners who, in their case, they had land. So we had houses, they had land, and that seems like a great way to partner. So, okay, I've got here and then there.
So you are willing to sell those units? Is there then anything long-term commitment for low-income housing?
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've been really careful. The people that we've sold them to at this point in time, we've really known their intentions with preserving that as either affordable housing or, in the case of Gardner's, really workforce housing, which we knew was a really big need. And I think that we would continue in that manner with any sales that we went with. I think that, we have our list of people who have said, gosh, I really want one of those for my backyard. And, at that point, then there comes a point where we say, okay, it's yours, we're going to recoup that cost. But we kind of haven't hit that point yet where we've said, oh, we have to sell these in order to pay our bills. And so, we've sold what we thought was sustainable for us. We know, Homeward is a great partner of ours, and we knew Homeward would utilize them for affordable housing. So we're going to hold on to them and try to keep them for affordable housing as much as possible. Mary.
Yeah, the Belgrade project, I had heard that it had been stalled because, and maybe I've got it wrong, because maybe it's a different development about utilities and...
There was a moment where and this is, developing in Belgrade versus developing in Bozeman has just been a really big breath of fresh air, actually. There was a moment in Belgrade where they had failed a state water test as far as capacity. And so they weren't going to be able to provide any new hookups. And they said, you know what, we're going to give you your building permits. We think that by the time that you're really ready to hook up, we should be good. Whereas, in Bozeman, that would have been the death of the project. So we are still moving forward in Belgrade.
And related to that, I'm going to sneak this other question in about Park County. And so the manufactured houses can't be put on trust land here because of zoning?
So the trust land that we currently own does have a couple of challenges. There's there is some zoning challenge, and then there are also within that there are and there's probably somebody here who knows the Park County or knows Livingston zoning code much better than I do. But the other piece was there are some minimum size requirements for manufactured homes that we don't meet. So, but I had encouraging conversations today. So.
In
Well, I mean, it would depend on the zoning of the property, so, yep. Okay, I think I have way back and then back.
I have a question about the tiny homes you're building. They're very tiny on purpose, but then you said that people have stuff so that you have to build an additional structure in the form of a garage to hold their stuff. Wouldn't it be smarter to make the tiny home not so tiny so that their stuff could be in one building instead of having that additional cost with another building?
That's a fair question, but you're going to build a garage regardless, particularly with the weather that we deal with. We want to provide that for our potential. And I'm speaking specifically about the home ownership project in Bozeman. It was always our intention to have a garage, so to make those garage spaces more conducive to storage just made sense for us. And then, and in communities like Livingston and Bozeman and Big Sky, like Tracy said, they're always going to have the kind of accompanying toys that go with kind of living in these communities. So you're going to have boats and bikes and all of those things. And it really, to have those things stored outside undermines affordable housing. It creates a situation where people can kind of point at them and say, see, that's where the affordable housing is, because there's stuff all over the yard. And so to keep these nice and to maintain the curb appeal of these units is a priority for HRDC.
I was curious about, sort of touching on both the senior housing earlier when you were talking about when people want to stay in their home versus moving into a retirement community, and now with this tiny home project, it sounds like there's a whole bunch of different demographics that affordable housing is impacted by, and now also people are interested in them as like a fun aesthetic backyard thing. So is it, the houses that you do have available, does the market sort of self-regulate in terms of like just having a variety of options available, or do you funnel people into like, this is the choice for you? Or like what kind of niche will those fill?
I think it depends a little bit on every market. So, for instance, the cabins or the small modulars, we felt like if we were to place those in Bozeman, we could sell them. And I believe that Homeward is intending to sell them in Missoula. However, the Belgrade market is different. And, our assessment kind of told us that they wouldn't maybe be as likely to be utilized as for sale property as they would be as they would be for rentals. So it really depends on the market that we're working in. Mm-hmm. Did I answer all of that? Oh, sorry, Peter.
What's the status of the rehabilitation of the hospital campus building? Has that been suspended, or what's the status?
So you do, utilizing any kind of low-income housing tax credits, you do sort of have to suspend rehabilitation at some point, because the requirement of the dollars is that you both acquire and rehabilitate. So you can't utilize those funds to just go out and buy an existing building. So there does come a point where you sort of need to stop any kind of substantial rehabilitation. So there's certain things that can occur. The other piece is you don't want to do too much, because tax credits are all tied to cost basis, and anything that's done doesn't get to be part of your cost basis. I think they might be, yeah.
See, there's another piece of it. If you bring home or CDBG dollars into a program like that, home and CDBG both fall under the National Environmental Protection Act and also under the Uniform Relocation Act. So there's two other additional pieces of cross-cutting federal legislation that those projects have to sort of bow to. The environmental piece says you don't put a shovel in the ground until you've cleared it from any potential significant impact. And the URA piece says everybody gets their fair market value, and anybody who's a current tenant, I don't think there are any current tenants, but if it were an occupied structure, whether by business or by any kind of tenant, then those people's rights would be protected as well. So all those things come into play when you bring at least my programs in. So there's potential there.
I think that's, here, sorry. I think that's one of the barriers sometimes to utilizing any kind of grant or federal programming is it does slow things down. You've got to wait. You know, you can't just move forward. So.
Yeah, I just recently discovered net zero prefab homes. They're not large and they're net zero, and they're quite remarkable and very affordable. Have you guys come across those?
Not yet. I think we've got our hands full right now. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, manufactured homes have changed a lot. And I think that's one of our big, you know, we have to overcome that stigma. So we think there are a lot of opportunities to utilize manufactured homes as really good replacement homes and, you know, in the resident-owned cooperatives that Mary Lou was talking about.
We used to have an organization, Yellowstone Business Partnership, and one of our objectives was to keep the air clean around Yellowstone Park. And the net zero is really a nice feature of that. So, fun to look into.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is what same property Mary was talking about, but you have 6 property lots up on the North Hill. And I called about those maybe 6 months ago and never got a reply. So do you have any plans for that property? Because there's.
You must have left that message for Brian. You must have left that message for Brian. Sorry. Sometimes phone messages do get caught in our convoluted little world. And after they get passed along for too long, somebody just sort of is like, I don't know where this goes. So I apologize that you didn't get a call back. We do. So we have evaluated those properties kind of on a continual basis. And they are part of our community land trust. And for a period of time, you know, when we were looking at building costs and what we thought we could get from selling a community land trust home, and trying to also, you know, keep it permanently affordable, we just didn't feel like the market was there. And so we had really held off. I think that we just completed our strategic planning well, we haven't even quite completed our strategic planning process. And Livingston and Park County are an area that we really want to expand our housing development footprint in, because we think that the market here has become much more favorable toward affordable housing. You know, for a long time, there was enough naturally occurring affordable housing that we didn't necessarily need to step in with programs with restrictions and all of these things. Well, now that market's changed. Quentin?
Yeah, and kind of to answer Bob's question a little bit, you and I talked about it at least a year ago and stuff like that. Utilizing the cabins perhaps on that property, but there again, it goes to, they're not zoned for that, and there'd be, you know, certain issues with that would have, you know, hurdles there that would have to be jumped.
That's what we talk about out of the box, right?
Mary Lou, when you are initiating one of these resident-owned communities, is that typically coming from the residents yourself, or are you identifying projects?
We identify the projects up front. We usually become aware if one is for sale. We have someone engaged at Rock USA Capital that seeks some of these properties out that might be listed, and then we get the seller's permission before we even talk to a resident. We don't hold any resident meetings until the seller's on board.
So if we know of any
Yes, just
coming up, we
Yep.
should give you a call.
Yep, be glad to. We look at the financials, 3-year history, that sort of thing, and then we have our own model that we follow. And we actually end up loaning more than market value to cover for some of the upfront expenses and that sort of thing. So it's a great model. I think when we began in 2007, there had been like 100 done in New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, state of New Hampshire has a state statute relative to first right of refusal whenever a park owner wishes to sell. That's the residents have an opportunity to purchase. In Montana, we do not have that, but there is a tax, Montana state income tax, I'm trying to think of the word, incentive. So there is a benefit for the seller in that regard, on a capital gain. Yes?
Would you just give a brief description of what NeighborWorks is?
NeighborWorks is a nonprofit organization. You've heard us amongst several of the speakers today. We're a nonprofit. It started in Great Falls. It used to just serve Cascade County. And back in the early 90s, we formed a committee. And I know it quite well because at the time I was the housing director with USDA Rural Development. So I have a long history of doing multiple kinds of these projects. But we took the Great Falls model and wanted to serve the entire state with the benefits and the opportunities they had available in Cascade County. So that's how it evolved. We've been in existence now for over 10 years. We are a statewide organization with maybe, not a large staff, but maybe 7 to 10 employees. Some are housed in Great Falls. We have remote offices in Kalispell, Missoula, Helena, and I'm from Billings. So I guess as far as what we do, we partner, we provide pre-development loans in some cases. We're a CDFI, so we have resources, and we do many of our things with partners, as you also heard lots of things partnering today. I think one thing I learned early on in my career is not one person can do everything, but if you brainstorm and visit with all your other resources, you can create an avenue to do things. And I remember I used to get lots of inquiries about, I would need $3 million, or, sometimes that's unachievable. But if you start breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, you can then maybe reach your goal over a length of time. But patience and pure guts and determination are good attributes. Yeah. And I want to know where you're housing all of those homes. Where are they right now? Your tiny homes?
Most of them, so those that haven't been sold are in Belgrade at Westervelt Transport.
Oh, I know Westervelt Transport.
They've been a great partner.
Oh, good, good.
So I want to put someone on the spot, Eric, if that's okay. I wanted to call out Eric Adamson came down from Helena today, and he's with Housing and Urban Development, and I was just wondering if there's anything you would like to share. How can you help us as a community, tackle this?
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
You're welcome. Join.
Yeah. Okay, well, first of all, I'm Eric from HUD in Helena, and thank you to Peter for inviting me down here. We bumped into each other earlier this month in Bozeman, and you told me about this event, and I thought, wow, I'd just love to come and listen and hear about some of the challenges. And I don't really have a formal role or anything, but I thought maybe what I could offer is maybe some federal updates and maybe try to weave together some themes of things that I've observed during the day. So the first thing, as far as federal updates, is that I don't really have a lot to share. I wish I had some news to share with you, but we're kind of waiting with this administration right now. We have a HUD secretary in Dr. Ben Carson that's doing a listening tour of the entire country right now. And he doesn't really have any mandates or special initiatives yet, but I think he's really genuine and sincere about listening to people across the country and hearing what the concerns are. So that's encouraging. We have a deputy secretary who was just appointed about a week ago, and she worked in the administration in the 2000s under the Bush administration. And so she is a big supporter of CDBG and home. So that's encouraging to hear. So we're kind of in a waiting pattern right now, and some of our industry partners know more than we do at HUD. So I can't really share many federal updates at this point. I wish I could, but I just don't have that info. But some of the themes today that I've really picked up upon, and I wanted to just relay. I feel kind of like a discussant, kind of sharing my observations with you. But some of the things that came up, I really liked how you talked about all segments of the housing market, and I think that started with Tracy's comments on the continuum. And so oftentimes that the extreme poverty is overlooked when we look at some of our housing events, and so that's easy to overlook sometimes, and I really like how you framed that to kind of set up the discussion. And really having a mix of all types of housing is a goal for most communities, for most healthy communities. But thinking about some of the main themes, I think partnering is key, especially in this era of limited resources. That's going to really strengthen any type of application that you put together, is the more partnering that you have, the more leveraging that you have from outside sources, it shows a real investment in what you are trying to do. And so I think the seeds have been planted for that today. I think there's a lot to build upon, but that's going to be crucial. And then trying to address all segments of the housing market is really critical. I liked how you talked about housing stability also, and part of that goes back to the Housing First model, which is sometimes a new concept when it comes to housing. And again, that was explained fairly well, but instead of providing services first, looking at housing people, and that just kind of perpetuates the stability and all the important parts of living in permanent housing. And so that's something that we've tried to promote at the federal level for the last several years, and that's been an emphasis in a lot of the applications that we review as far as scoring and looking at priorities, is how the community is going to address the permanent housing aspect. So I think that's really critical. So I think there's a lot to build upon, particularly the creative types of housing. I think that's what I'm hearing all across Montana, is that communities know that there's so many limitations, and so they're trying to, I guess this is cliche, but do more with less, think outside the box. So we've heard all of those cliches, but really I think it's authentic. I think communities are looking at new ways of trying to solve some of these housing challenges. So I'm encouraged to hear about what's going on. And I guess that's my word of encouragement to leave you with, is continue to partner, continue to have the conversations. And I know Peter talked about having follow-up after this and bringing people together, because that's how those really creative ideas spur and they gain momentum. And so I just appreciate the chance to observe. I don't really have a lot to contribute at this point, but know that moving forward, we're going to be a resource and hopefully help bring people together for future collaboration. So thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Eric. We have time for one more question. Or are you questioned out? All right, let's give these folks a round of applause.